Okay, I'll just start my timer. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to this presentation. My title is Climate Communication in Practice, Innovation in Data and Arts. And I'm working with a multidisciplinary institute, which we research in all areas of sustainability and climate change. Just very briefly, this presentation will cover a background of what are the research questions about, what are some of the contexts that have been assessed using a literature review, the importance of climate communication, the case study giving the basis for this research, and also the outcome from the test pilot of some data innovation. So just for the first two slides, it will be quite heavy in context because it's based on the literature review. Just on the background of this research is that we know that in the world today, majority of people are concerned. They often use two words, concerned and alarmed about the climate crisis, or what we call it climate emergency. Therefore, climate communication is very much essential today. And one way to do it is that what has been found is that framing is an often used methodology to conceptualize climate change terms. And framing is to provide a more narrow focus to the issues surrounding across different views and to influence climate behaviors. And the third thing is that in spite that there are methodology like framing, there is still a lack of consensus in regards to coming up with effective methodology with climate change. Therefore, there's actually a need to have a more multidisciplinary approach through science, through research, driving data and communication science together so that the information that we deliver to all walks of life can be better understood. The context of climate communication ideally encompass several elements. The first part is that it is not just the way we inform the public about a current situation regarding climate, but is designing that information in a way that is also centered to the audience. And also it incorporates a very appealing visual perception. Combining both will allow to provide a better effective climate communication. So there's no one way fit solution. If you were to incorporate just a user approach, but without a visualization of the information, it may have a less likelihood to influence climate behavior or to provide an effective interpretation of the information. And one way to do this is to have a multi-layer way of communicating the information. Apart from having a solid information ready to be communicated, is to organize an event, gathering your social networks, whether it is through a physical workshop or through like this conference, Climate Hope, really enhances the effectiveness of the information that will go out to the audience. The third element is that climate information or communication is highly dependent on the context. I will go further about this in the next slide. And the fourth element is that there are many ways we can do this. It's through the use of art, imagery, data visualizations, paintings, drawings, photography, and the common data visualizations that you can simulate from different programs and software. However, there are many challenges. Although we have many advanced progress in terms of climate communication, often we ourselves can find some difficulty to understand what does the data inform us. So there's need for more saliency and robustness. The importance of climate communication is that it may seem as something very general and also perceived to be unimportant in the public society. But however, climate communication is very important because it impacts several sectors of the economy and society. For one reason, it influences society towards climate action. It mobilizes effective resources to mitigate or to respond to natural disasters or climate events. It also provides additional data and robust information to frame policies like the IPCC. So, bearing in mind of all these elements, therefore, climate communication is actually a very important thing and a very critical element to further explore throughout research, through science, and through data management. A case study has been done. So this is actually a typical information that anyone would see in the news, in a magazine, or in a scholar paper, right? So visual encoding is a very basic way to inform climate information, whether it's weather, humidity, temperature, forest risk, forest fire risk. So you can actually visually encode the risk of different areas according to regions using a probability analysis at the percentage level. And often many people ask, Ariel, where can I get data? Well, it takes a lot of effort to get data to climate change information. What we have found is that it's more easy to get any data regarding weather and climate change at developed countries. So the first thing is to look at developed countries where there are weather stations and survey towers. Secondly, is to directly approach the authority that manages these weather stations or towers, or they have their own database of the information. And most often, the national authority will be more willing to share that scientific information to the researcher. 80 to 90%, they would disclose the data, unless the remaining 10%, they will not only disclose it if it's a highly risk data, meaning to say, if it's information which can trigger emergency response, or it has not yet been announced through policy regulations. But if you're talking about general data, right? So like, for example, if it's going to rain, are we going to have a thunderstorm next month or in the coming 3 months? It's very easy to get this data at the national region of where you are based at by the local authorities. Secondly, a second way to get data is to go to the ESRI software, and they actually have a simulation platform. Firstly, they have their own database in regards to historical climate projections. And through the software of ArcGIS, we can simulate additional visualizations and also do more enhanced topography of the climate projection using the ArcGIS software. So this is just one example. The second example is that apart from that software and doing your other simulations, is to frame your topography of your data. So in this example, the data is not just based on colors. So these colors shows what is the cooling and warming temperatures of the Earth. On the top image, it shows cooling temperature. And on the bottom, most bottom, it shows global warming. But apart from that, is to add an additional layer, an additional filtering into your map, meaning to say there must be an additional programming to show what is the scale of other changes, climatic changes occurring in the map. And this can be shown in this example. If you look at the lower bottom, on the top, it shows on the northern hemisphere, it's global warming. But on the bottom hemisphere, the blue lines are showing where the colder spots are, meaning to say these regions are not having global warming effect. So meaning to say by adjusting your variables in your data and adjusting the scalar of your data will enable you to filter out more granularity in showing your information. Now, this is more advanced, and it has been achieved through machine learning and big data encryption. Firstly, it's at a 3D form. So the earlier visualization I have shown you is in 2D form, but this is in a 3D form, where you could actually see not just in the northern hemisphere, but more clearly of how the global warming could spread across different countries in North of America, EU, and in the UK. And the 3D simulation also enables audience to interact with the data that has been simulated. So you could actually, like Google Earth, you could actually spin the global 3D simulated data. Now, climate change information is not just happening at the geography or environment sector, but also at the business corporate level. So as you are aware, we have a lot of environmental standards today. And what we know for sure is that at the business sector, they are using a very common approach. They are using impact assessment metrics. For example, grading the level of risk and the responsibility for a business from low, medium to high, and using a simple color scale or a gradient scale from 1 to 5. And it's very common to see this impact assessment metrics in the approach of all businesses worldwide in evaluating their risk to climate change. And in the other sector, as followed by the previous presentation on poetic story, is using a more social-centered and equity-driven methodology. So by using videos, photography, and also storytelling, but making sure that the narrative of the video and the picture is centered to, sorry about that, is centered to the society and to the marginalized population, because it captures better the narrative of how does the climate impact society. So on this left picture, you could see it's more impactful, where the sun is shining through a senior citizen holding a child. And on the right image, you could see a marginalized population having access to water in a non-traditional way. The other dimension that we have done on the test pilot is using a dependency wheel. So just for example, right, if you want to conduct a study on how does different SDG, we have 17 SDG, interacts among the other SDG. Or for example, how does natural disaster affect other categories, like how does natural disasters affect food security, social resilience, population risk? So you're able to actually use a dependency wheel, and this is easily coded using a HTML programming technique. And you don't need to use a very elaborate programming like Python or C programming. Just by using HTML, you could generate a dependency wheel to show the interactions from one category to another category. The other test pilot is using other form of emissions monitoring. So there's actually a company called Carbon Space, and on the right side is a software where through the software you can actually monitor the carbon emissions, carbon footprint, carbon flux of different regions around the world. And the last part, and this is an actual image taken in Asia, where recently on the 11th to 12th of August this month, we had a meteor shower happening worldwide. And it's also to capture and to link such events to climate change, right? Because you cannot actually see meteor shower without a clear sky. And you have to reduce light pollution. And you cannot see meteor shower in an urban city. You have to go to nature. You have to go camping. You have to connect with nature. So it's doing such creative way of linking one event, one natural event, to another environment ecosystem narrative that can better influence a society to understand why climate change is an issue and what impacts climate change. And the other part is language. We use this book, guidance book, to understand how we can better communicate the language, the terms, the terminology, the grammar around issues of climate change. So for example, the term climate crisis and climate emergency can mean differently to every person. And this has been found true in an actual workshop done through an exercise where you practice how you communicate different terms with a different party. And you will often find that the different party interpret the term in a different perception. And in conclusion, data and communication as a whole is connected to a few things. It has to be clear. It has to be also simple to understand. And if you have interactions from one category to another category, from one variable to another sub-variable, it has to be simple for any audience to understand. And as highlighted in the literature review, it has to be user-centered, society-centered, so that it drives the actual meaningful impact that it intends to be. I have finished 15 minutes, and that's my presentation. Thank you.